What's going on, friends? Sanford is back once again. I trust you're well. Once again, we're talking about DeathRacer's, and we're going to be talking about how to get from this motor to this motor and gearbox, hopefully in a few easy steps. We're also going to be talking about this battery and the battery charger, and also how to slice your files for the best possible settings that I would suggest. So, well, let's get straight on into this one.
You are watching a master at work.
This channel is sponsored by Polymaker and PCBWay, the best choice in filament and PCB manufacturing. Okay, so in my last video, I did talk a little bit about this battery and this charger, possibly not to everybody's extent that they would like to, but this is a standard Lipo battery. It's a 7.4 volt battery. It's a 5200, and these ones are basically the ones I would use for any kind of death racer. That'll give you a good longevity in regards to the races. You'll do a full 30 minutes at least with this, depending on how quick and how fast and how furious you want to be inside of the races, of course. But generally, this is probably the bog standard one you want to go with. Nothing too special about it. Reasonably cheap as well. And again, with regards to the battery charger, this is probably the cheapest one I found. It's a ISDT PD60. And again, all you need to do is plug your battery into here, and also your tail, which is this bit here, into this part here. And again, it's a USB-C charger. You set your settings up to LiPo and you give it a charge. It's very, very simple stuff. The next part I want to talk about is the assembly of the motor, which is this thing, into a gearbox and end scenario. Now, we did also look at possibly adding these little spacers in there, but in regards to what we're doing with the framework now, it's not going to fit. So what we've done is I've now cut this. We're also going to modify this frame ever so slightly as well. I'll explain more, but let's get into this first bit where we're going to cut down the gearbox. Okay, so we've got a couple of things here. We have got some Loctite, which you definitely will need for your screws. We have the gearbox, again, that comes in the kit, and we also have the motor. Now, what we're going to do for the first part here is we are going to take this little spring gear thing, and basically that's going to go here. That's where we want to mount it on the drive. Let's try and get that in focus there. So this needs to go about here. So in order to do that, what we need to do is, at the moment, it's going to foul. So if you try and put this in, it needs modifying. There's a space there. Now, Big Tree Tech did try and supply a spacer, but unfortunately that's not going to work in this scenario. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut this down, and we're also going to modify the frame. So there will be a different file for that, which I'll put in the link in the description. But for the first part, what we want to do ultimately, let me get this into focus, is we're going to cut this down by that much because we want that to sit right at the bottom there. So if we just put a marker there, we know how much we're going to need to cut off. So I'm just going to get the handy Dremel out and just cut that straight away. There we go. Okay. And once we've done that, we're just going to take this little gear and just give it a little love tap like that. There we go. It's rudimental, but it definitely works. Now, the other thing you're going to want to check is when you've put this on and you've pushed that in, you're going to want to make sure that your motor is actually working and functioning, because you don't want to take on this next bit without ultimately testing it. So we're going to grab the battery, and we're going to grab the positive and negative terminals here. It's not going to matter which way you do this, because one way just makes it go forwards, the other way makes it go backwards. I'm just going to pop this into here, and we should hear, once we get the connection right, the motor going. So that was kind of easy, right? So let's put that to one side. So that's it. That's how I've positioned that. We've pushed that sort of right to the end there, and I'm quite happy with the way that that's going to work. Now, the next thing we're going to do is basically pop this on top. So the gearbox is going to sit on top of this, but in order to do that, we need to take this bracket off at the bottom here. So I'm just going to get the Allen key, and there's 4 screws here just to undo. So these gearboxes are, what they've got written on them is 36, and it's DC 1.5 to 1.8. So 1/5 ratio. So I guess it's 1 in every 5, because they need to be slowed down inside of the gearbox, being sure that we're not going to sort of throw everything out. That's your planetary drive there. Hopefully you can see that if it focuses for long enough. So all we're going to be doing here is making sure that this cog fits in the middle of those cogs. But in order to do that, you just have to be very careful. We're going to take this bottom section, and there are 2 holes here that we just need to line up. And with the screws that have been provided, we're just going to pop those in. Again, you're probably going to want to use some Loctite on this. I've got a little bit left in here. There we go. Okay. Pop these on here as well. So we're going to take 2 of the small screws here, which are M3 bolts, which are countersunk ones. And we're going to load that in. Now, it's really important that if the bolts or the screws that you're putting in at this point are too long, it will cause a problem to the drive mechanism. So we need to make sure that it's spinning after we've put these in. Because if they're too long, they will basically foul on the motor drive. The other thing to consider is not putting them all the way in to start with, just getting everything lined up. You don't want to mess up the thread. This is a bit messy. Pop that one in. Let's tighten this one down. There we go. It's just caught. Okay, down it goes. So what you should see when these are in, you'll obviously feel that it will bite, but you want to make sure that there's no gap between these 2 parts here. The other thing with these motors, because they're 550 motors, they also have this shroud around them. So I'm going to also take this off at the same time. So hopefully that will just pop off like that. Get rid of that because it's just going to be added weight that you're probably not going to need. So that's what we've got now. Let's just see if it's moving. That's moving absolutely fine inside of here. Next thing we do is take the gearbox. Again, there's the planetary gears inside of there. And we're just going to pop them on top and just make sure we've got adequate movement, which we do have. Pop those in. Again, just tighten them down. In doing this, in the last couple of years of doing this, I haven't had any issues with gearboxes or the screws in the gearboxes coming loose. Usually what we find is with the shaft here, when we put the coupler on, that occasionally will go loose because the grub screws are obviously put under quite a lot of pressure. So that's us done there. And again, we just grab the battery and we just make sure that we've got, there we go. Again, if you hear any grinding or if it doesn't turn smoothly, you're going to have to loosen those off and just check that those threads aren't bedding into anything down here, especially with the motor. So the bottom coupler here, as you screw into that, if you have the screws that are too long, it will eat into the motor mechanism. So you want to make sure that that's definitely not happening. But on this one and also on this one, we've got full movement there, no problems at all. So next we have this little part here. This is actually printed in carbon fiber. And I know we'll touch on materials in a little bit. But the idea of this is just to sort of go through the kit. Most of the kits, or certainly half of the kits, have been sold now. The majority are actually being shipped to people's homes. They're not actually being shipped to 3D Printopia. There were a number that have been shipped to 3D Printopia. And but that totaled, I think, around 9 out of the ones that have sold completely out. And again, once they have been sold out, then there will be another 200 that are going to be assembled. So we'll do a second run of these ready for the 2025 season and also the sponsorship season as well. Again, more videos will be coming out on how to build these. We'll also be filming at 3D Printopia, and you'll see Ryan and the Offset Maker guys putting these and assembling these. So hopefully you'll get everything that you need. I know that not everybody is on Facebook and not everybody has full visibility to some of the things. So we are working. We had a meeting this morning talking about how we are going to make that more achievable for everybody. So maybe that's on Discord, or maybe it's to do with the Patreon page. But ultimately, you'll find all the build videos and stuff on the channel here. And it will be under the DeathRacer tab. Okay, so that's 3 of those in there. One more to go. Again, you probably don't need as many as we're putting in here, but it's good to have that stability in there. And let's grab that. There we go. Again, same situation with these. You can't really go too wrong, but you don't want to go too deep with these things because you might cause issues inside of the gearbox. But this just needs to bind and bite. And we should be good to go. Now, the difference between these motors and the motors that we've previously used, these are 550 motors. The ones we used before were 540 motors. So these are slightly more powerful motors. But the problem that we've got here is if we assemble this and put this in together, they, although width-wise they're okay, lengthwise they're not. There's actually a small foul that's on this part here. So we're going to modify this frame ever so slightly just to pack it out at the top, just so we can get these things back. It's actually only out by probably 4 to 5 mil, but we want them to be right. So we're going to modify those files. And again, that will be in the download section on the Patreon file under the Big Tree Tech element, but it's literally just out. It's only just out there. But in regards to this little thing, you're not going to need this. I would strongly suggest that you cut the rods down. The profile is much better, I would say, in that way. And obviously then you have a little bit more room, obviously, for your cables behind here as well. So so that's how you build the gearboxes and motors. We've got 2 of these now. I'm going to print these ones back up again. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to talk about how to slice and what maybe your profile should be set to. Right then. Okay, so this is the folder that you're going to be downloading. We are going to be using the Pro drives, and also, like I said before, there is a modified version that we're going to be putting in. Now, there is the mainframe here. Let's have a look at some of the files here just really quickly. That is a modified version. Again, some of these have rods and some of them have prints. Some of them have the bottoms that are taken off so you can get easy access to electronics. Some of them don't. So it all very much depends on what type of DeathRacer you want to do. And again, we are going to work a little bit harder on ensuring that the file system is set up. And like I say, here, there are no rods. You actually have to put the rods in yourself. So, you know, you can do that as you please. So let's have a look at the drive system. And again, there will be a modified version of this coming. So that version of the Left Pro mainframe will change. We're just going to drop this into Prusa Slicer real quick as well. So let's get the left one in there, and then let's also get the right one in there. Here we go. Right. See if we can tidy that up a little bit now. It's now downloading stuff. There we go. Okay, let's push this button and pop that down. Now, for the majority of these files, I would probably take this one out and that one out, and I might even suggest that you print those singularly. You're probably going to want to print them with 10 parameters. So parameter settings, just to show you here, it's different on Bamboo Slicer to the way it is on Prusa Slicer, but your parameters here are your shells. Okay, so if we put these up to 10, and then if we then change the infill to triangles, and then we set that to about 30%, that's where I'm going to feel happy. So let's just slice that up real quick and I'll show you what I mean. There we go. Okay, so there are a couple of things here that I want to point out. Number one, that's what it looks like if you're doing that many parameters. Okay, so you're getting a good amount of coverage inside of some of the prints here. Because what we found in the past is that these things can break off. And again, if you look through here, that is as solid as you can get it, okay, via parameters. That's totally solid. So when you run your, let me see if I got it here. So when you run your bolts through on this particular print, you'll be putting that through the frame, pushing that on, and then you'll be running 2 bolts, countersunk bolts, all the way through here. So I don't know how long that is. It's probably like, I don't know, 50, 60 mil. The reason that you want that and you don't want tons of infill around it is because you want that to take and you want that to, you know, ultimately be the strength of what you're printing. The other thing here is on the frames. So the frames are again here, you know, they're pretty much 100% there. There's a tiny, tiny bit of infill in there, but that's where I'd feel comfortable, or certainly most comfortable. Now, depending on how you want to build your Death Racer, depending on what materials you want to use, that is going to be very much entirely up to you. If you want to use PLA, and there's been a ton of PLA Death Racers in the past, some of which have gone on to win. John from Tripod's Garage, he printed his in PLA and it just kept going and going and going. And then I think he did another race at a different event. And again, it kept going and going and going. It was almost like an in-joke that the thing just kept working. Now, the more exotic materials, like, and I mentioned before, carbon fiber, again, they do add a layer of expense, but they also give a layer of integrity into what you're doing. And ultimately what you want to try and do here is build this as best you can. Now, affordability is obviously a factor here, but again, Polymaker at the moment are supporting the filaments. And if you do print the Polymaker Death Racer plaques on either side, then you will get various vouchers and stuff. So you ultimately will get your money back on that. So that's my settings for these particular files. Let's reslice this and show you the next stuff. So speaking about materials, I've got 2 drive systems here. This one is Co-PA by Polymaker, and again, this one is PETG carbon fiber, also by Polymaker. Now, if we look at the resistance on this, if I flex this with this hand, you can see there's not really too much movement. Whereas with the Co-PA, there's quite a lot. And in fact, I reckon if I squeeze that hard enough, I'd probably end up breaking it. So working with the materials that you've got, and dependent on whether or not you just want to go with PLA and maybe you want to do 100% infill or more than the standard elements that I've already highlighted, that's going to be entirely up to you. But these are printed in exactly the same format. So again, 10 parameters with 30 to 35% infill. And again, we've still got that flexion there, which you can see, versus this one, there's just not that much. So depending on which material you're going to want to use. And of course, at the moment, Polymaker is still offering that really fabulous deal where if you print the side plates with Polymaker logos on it, they will give you vouchers. I think the first one is, for 2 of them, it's certainly $150. So it's definitely well worth your time to print those side panels up and then show Polymaker at the event. Okay, so next up, let's just go back to the drive here and have a quick look at a few more settings. Okay, so as I said before, 2 different styles. Depending on which style you want to go with, will depend on, you know, do you want the one with the rods? The kit does come with 2 rods, so, you know, whether or not you want to put that in or not, it's going to be entirely up to you. Again, I'd say 10 parameters and again, 30 to 35% infill. Again, depending on which materials you're going to use. This isn't really going to put you at a disadvantage. I think that's going to be one of the main elements. Now, we have got some other stuff inside of this. We've got the Grave Digger modification, which again, is a different front, and it also has like a flipper digger part on the front of it. That was kind of popular about last year, which we were messing around with. There are some step files here as well, so you can modify those in Fusion 360 if you wish to. Let's have a look at the rider. So we've got color A and color B. Again, all we're going to do here is take that, drop it in, and hit the button wherever the button's disappeared to. There it is, bosh, there. Color A, so you've even got Joel's head there, look. You can remove that, bosh. Color A, print those. Again, you don't need to go crazy with that. You know, 2 parameter lines will be absolutely fine for that, and maybe a 20% infill. We don't really tend to get too many drivers that are being sort of smashed. But, you know, again, if you want to stick to the standard and do 10 parameters across the board, of course you can. On color B, same kind of situation. There you go. Again, you might want to modify the head, and that's one of the big things that we're trying to encourage people to do is modify your rider. There will be some more videos coming out on how to do that, and we're going to enlist a few people to show you how to do that. Another front end here is called the Hammerhead. Again, this has got a slightly different front to it. It's good for sort of smacking into your competitors. I'll show you an example there. That's the front end of it. think that's pretty cool. I do like that. That was a fun mod to do. The modified 2-part frame again is here. That's what we were talking about earlier. Now, I know somebody on Discord was saying about, well, where do the heat inserts go? Well, the heat inserts will go into these particular files here. So again, you'd run your M3 bolts straight through there, your countersunk bolts into there, and they will sit inside of each one of these, and you can see exactly where they go. I don't want to be sort of slapdash over this, but the heat inserts, ideally, the thing is, if you turn your DeathRacer upside down and you whack those 4 screws out, it's going to be really, really simple for you to kind of add maintenance to it should you need to. So if you need to get access to your electronics, I think that's a really good mod as well. So, right, let's remove that. Again, same situation, 10 parameters is what I'm suggesting. What else do we have here? Drives and frame. Now, obviously, we don't need drive A and B. In fact, to be honest with you, these should be removed completely now because they are the old... Oh, no, they're not. Okay, so this is the old version, okay? So definitely don't print this. This is the 37D. So this was an older style motor, which was called a Pololu motor, that we don't use anymore. So that is, redundant now. We'll probably get that removed on the next lot of file systems. So you don't need to print any of this stuff. This is kind of old elements to it. The tracks you do need, I think it was 60 of these. They've got to be printed in TPU. I would probably go 3 parameters and maybe 5% infill on that. They don't need to be too crazy. They don't need to be sort of too taut. You will get stretch out of them. So maybe 1 or 2 of them, maybe you want to do at, 50% infill or something like that, just to sort of make sure that they're not going to stretch. And of course, when you get motion on these things, the tracks will expand because of the way that the TPU works. It puts friction into it. It pushes things apart. So maybe what you could do is you could do maybe 20 in, 3 parameters and 5%, and then maybe another 10 in, 20%, and hopefully you'll get enough kind of traction there so that won't pull that apart too much. Give it a go, see what you make of it. It'd be interesting to see the results, if nothing else. Okay, so those aside, we've got the bludger here, which again are these 2 files. Go as heavy as you want with those, maybe 100% on both of those things. Again, super easy to install. There is, what is this? Okay, this is another mod. We're going to try and encourage people to put the mods into the to be submitted into this particular download file as well. The reason being is because a little while ago we started having people modifying stuff and then just posting it on Facebook, and nobody really knew what they were for or what they were doing. So we just want to make sure that people are kind of doing it the right way. Obviously, you don't have to share your files, but it's certainly encouraged if you want to do so. Again, this is the next part. I mean, this is basically the seat and everything. I haven't really ever seen too much damage being done to any of these parts. So again, 3 parameters for the majority of this. Maybe do 5 on this part here. And again, sort of 20 to 30% infill, depending on which materials you're going to be using as well. There's a servo that sits inside of here. So again, you might want to beef that up, maybe 5 parameter lines inside of that, and maybe a 30% in that. So those 2 files, I would probably say you might need to beef those up ever so slightly. Yeah, that's pretty good. Front frame, again, similar kind of situation, really. This is going to take some impact. So again, 5 and 30. The rest, maybe 3 and 20. Yeah, I mean, small servos sit on here if you decide to install them. I've started to steer away from that because those little baby servos, they don't tend to last. Basically, the idea of this is that when the racer goes along, his arms move backwards and forwards, and he goes left and right. So it looks like the racer is actually controlling it. However, the big problem with that is it's not so much in the programming. And we do have, Big Tree Tech have put leads together here for, for various things. These are the leads, actually. So you double up on those connections. So when you go forward, he pushes both hands forward, and when you go backwards and stuff, it moves around. It's really good. But my experience of them is that they tend to burn out after a couple of races. And the thing is, with this whole racer situation, is the idea is to batter your opponent. So if you spend a lot of time, creating these files, it's throwaway money with those servos. They're very cheap, though, to be honest. They're only a couple of bucks each. So, it's up to you on whether or not you want to take that as a pursuit. Let's get rid of that. I don't think there's much more here that I could really tell you about. Again, the file system here, there's lots of different files inside of here. Color A and B for the rider, the frame and the drive. Again, ignoring those two files altogether, I would say, other than the tracks, which you need, again, 30 of it is written there as well. Okay, so this bludger is whether or not you have it stood up this way or you have it stood that way. So it'll swing out like that, or it will swing out like this, depending on what you want. The most effective one that I've seen so far is the one at the back that swings, you know, left and right. So we're almost there. Finally, with these nearly being finished, there is a bit of a change to the kit version. So the kit version is a 550 motor and it's slightly longer and a bit more beefy. So the difference here is this is the original, and you can see here the way that the profile sits. This profile here is slightly different. It's slightly wider and it fits very nicely. And ultimately, all we need to do is take our gear and slide it straight in like that and pop our screws in, and we should be, there we are, good to go. So that's that. There's two files though that I mentioned that have changed. There we go, easy. The second file is this. It's this file here. It's the gear file. It's now got a hole in it. The reason it's got a hole in it, it means that you don't have to cut down the gearbox. So when I built this one, I did cut that down. And when we were talking inside of the group, we decided actually the better way to do that would be popping a hole in there so you don't have to cut this bit down. So you do have to cut the motor shaft. And again, that's just one tiny little cut there. But other than that, that's pretty much the only kind of mods that you're going to need to do. Let's whack them in the slices so you can just see and understand those as well. Okay, here we are. These are the two files that have been modified. This one's called kitdrivegear.stl. You need to print two of those, obviously, for the drives. What you'll need to do with this one is you'll need to print two of those, but one would need to be mirrored. So if we take that and Control-C, Control-V, and then we hit the mirror, and then we can mirror that way, I believe, and there we are done. So that's what you'll need to print those two. So just to sort of point out the obvious here, this now has a hole in it where it didn't necessarily have it before. And this one, again, just around here, just around the bottom, hopefully you can see that on the cursor, just around the bottom there. That is, as you can see, just slightly modified across the line there. But that is the only modifications that we're putting out in regards to getting the kit built. So I think that's about it. I will be printing up a few of these to bring to 3D Printopia as well, should you need them. Other than that, I think we're pretty good. Obviously, the Facebook page is open and welcoming everybody and all the new members there. And, of course, the Discord, of course, Polymaker, and my own Discord channel as well. We are there to help you guys get the best out of your Death Racers. Now, any questions or comments, please leave them below. But we will see you at an event soon. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.
You are watching a master at work.